How are we fixing the Commanders, Sam?
Well, we got the most cap space in the NFL, and we got the second overall pick, so it feels like we got options.
Have you gone deep dive on the quarterbacks yet? Do you have takes on a top three?
No, I need to get back into that again. The COVID thing blasted me for a week, and I'd kind of only skirted over the surface level stuff to begin with, so I need to get back in. My only real take at the moment is that Caleb Williams is clearly number one quarterback, and everything else is TBD.
I'm seeing a lot of people back and forth on Jaden Daniels and Drake May. People that I like, people that I trust. I've both ways on it.
I've gotten a lot lower on Drake May. I've watched a lot of Caleb Williams, watched a lot of Drake May, and then I need to watch more of everybody else. But when I watched more of Caleb Williams, I was sort of more impressed the more I watched, and when I watched more of Drake May, I was less impressed the more I watched. So I'm absolutely open to conversations that involve maybe Drake May isn't even QB2. And that opens up guys like Jaden Daniels and even J.J. McCarthy, who we snagged for the Giants in the second round, or Bo Nix or whatever. But I don't know. I'm not blown away by Drake May is my point, which is relevant because Washington is probably looking at a scenario where he's right there.
All right, for me, I'm gonna as of right now, I'm with May as QB2. I would take him at 2 if I'm Washington. Are we even considering other options? Are we considering other trade down? Are we considering not taking a quarterback?
At 2, I think you probably have to take the quarterback. The problem becomes what happens if you're, like, let's say, just for the sake of argument, the person making the call in Washington's building is exactly like me, and he's like, I really don't love Drake May, and he's the consensus, quote unquote, number 2 guy. Do I try and force somebody else who I probably don't love either, Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy at number 2? Or can I find a trade? Like, is there someone else that wants number 2 enough that I can trade back and make it happen? And then you're in that world where, well, if I didn't love anybody here, do I love them more in the second round, even though I've picked up some draft picks along the way? Like, it's probably still not answering the problem, right?
Sometimes you try to connect the dots based off of where a guy's been and what they've done in the past. So Adam Peters, the new GM for Washington, was in San Francisco. He was there with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch from the beginning. And I remember back in 2017 when Kyle and Lynch both signed massive contracts, 6-year contracts, I said, okay, you don't need to force the quarterback. Go back to the Patriots discussion that we had. You don't necessarily need to have a quarterback year one. Build the infrastructure first. That's what the Niners did. Now, in hindsight, they passed up on Mahomes and Deshaun Watson in those drafts. They passed up on Mitchell Trubisky. They drafted Solomon Thomas, right? It did not turn out to be a good decision, obviously, knowing what we know now. But the point is they were patient. And eventually the Niners started winning with the Jimmy Garoppolos and Brock Purdy's of the world with a really, really good roster around them. That doesn't mean just because Adam Peters was in San Francisco that he's going to try to do the same exact thing. But is that an option for Washington? Because they have these free agent assets. They've got 9 draft picks, 4 in the top 67, including the number 2 pick. Do you turn that into just a really massive haul and build an incredible roster and figure out quarterback later?
I guess part of the question is, like, I wonder if the entire league actually is going to look at these quarterbacks the same way and say, I don't know that this is as strong a class at the top as people thought it was right away. And actually it's really Caleb Williams and then a gap to other people. And if that's how most people see it, I don't know what kind of market number 2 or number 3 overall is going to have. Like, sure, there are teams that want a quarterback, but if they don't love the ones available, are they going to do a crazy trade just because they need a quarterback? Or are they willing to be more patient in that and just hope that they find an answer?
I think there's potential desperation there. I mean,
but then there's also the case of, look, Drake May has the tools are there. Like, the tools are there for Drake May to be amazing at the next level. He's got prototypical arm, size, athleticism.
I think that's why he goes at 2.
Right.
Yeah.
So not only does he probably go at 2, but there are probably going to be people out there that love that guy. And I still think, I said this ages ago, I still think it's probably true. I think there's probably people that will have him as QB1. Like, I don't love Caleb Williams. I love Drake May. So it's all in the eye of the beholder. But
I think at the end of the day, we're looking at people think there'll be a top 3. Even if there's a gap, if they think there's a gap between Caleb Williams and 2 and 3, they're going to say there's a top 3. And if there's a gap, it's between 3 and 4. I think that's where we'll end up landing, that Jaden Daniels will end up going in that top 3 or 4 picks. that Drake May will. I would take May if I'm Washington. What else are we going to do with this roster? Remember, they got rid of this nice, really young defensive line that they had, traded away Montez Sweat, traded away Chase Young. When you look at the depth chart and returning starters, defensive side of the ball, there's
nobody.
6. It's one of the lowest in the NFL.
Yeah.
Some pieces on the offensive side of the ball, but yeah, still a lot of work to do both sides.
Yeah, I mean, they basically they completely undid everything that they had on defense. You've got Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne on the interior. You've got basically no edge rushers to speak of. The secondary is now incredibly young and not proven at all. I mean, Emmanuel Forbes had a pretty rough rookie season. They need him to take a massive step forward in year 2. They've got major problems on defense.
And on the offensive line. Right, they've got issues on both sides of the ball here. So let's take the quarterback at 2, whoever your favorite is. And then from there, you mentioned all the cap space that they have. Where are we going to go in free agency? Are they going to?
Well, the good news is they are the opposite of the Patriots, right? Where their biggest weakness is defense, and that's where the strength of the free agent group is. So
it includes some of their free agents, Cameron Curl, being out there.
But I think they can go shopping in free agency and actually bring in some players that have to legitimately transform the defense.
Dan Quinn takes over as head coach. I think in the past, Quinn was like the old school Seattle cover 3 coach. I think he's shown that he can adjust to his defense and what he's capable of doing. He had a plethora of pass rushers in Dallas.
Yeah.
He has none of that in Washington.
Certainly edge rushers.
I mean, yeah, it's Jonathan Allen up front.
Yeah.
On the interior defensive line.
So you've got to imagine he would want a top tier edge rusher.
So they in the Danielle Hunter sweepstakes, Brian Burns, Bryce Huff. Bring Chase Young back.
Resign him. I mean, Bryce Huff, I think, would be an amazing addition to that defensive line. I don't like with the amount of money they've got. They could do 2. They could double dip. They traded away their 2. Let's bring in 2 new free agents, Bryce Huff and whether it's Danielle Hunter, whether it's somebody else. I don't know if Brian Burns is going to hit the market, but whether it's somebody like that, if they could come out of this free agent group with 2 starters, even if they're high-priced ones, I think that would be good.
Because you're talking Peters in San Francisco and Dan Quinn. I mean, defensive line depth is in their history in San Francisco, in Dallas, Quinn with Seattle, wherever they've been.
I mean, they kind of need to do their version of what the Browns did last year and just hammer a position group in one offseason.
Kendall Fuller and Cameron Curl mentioned both of those guys, corner and safety, both free agents. That's a place they need to attack. I think in the draft they're going to come back and pick at 36, and then 40 and 67. Pick 40 is from the Bears. That was in the Montez Sweat trade, so they're feeling pretty good about that. 3 picks in the top 40.
Yeah, and six in the top 103.
Yes.
So.
Oh yeah, if you go all the way to 103, there's a lot to do there.
They have a lot of high value draft picks, like almost 6 top 100 draft picks, really close to that. So yeah, they can do some real work.
I think offensive and defensive line, man. If they go edge, if they do solidify edge in free agency, I think there'll be some corner depth at 36 to 40 and 67. They can get a starting safety in there, and then the offensive line depth. You get a guy like Graham Barton from Duke, because they have a need at center and guard. Barton can do both. He played tackle at Duke. I think some people might even like him at tackle. I think he could be a really nice fit for them. Fontenot, who you mentioned from Washington a little bit earlier, if he goes early second. So there's starting potential along that offensive line.
There'll also be
defensive line depth as well.
There'll be some good edge rushers available at the top of the second as well. I think that's the kind of area where you're either going to get somebody for the trenches.
Give me some Chop Robinson in Washington.
That's what I'm saying. Chop Robinson, Darius Robinson might be available at that spot. He could go in the first round at this point, but I think one of those trench spots will be available at the top of the second.
All right. The more I'm talking through this Lions type of rebuild here, let's get the trenches first. Let's get the O-line solidified. Let's get the D-line back on track in Washington, and then we'll get to the edges, get to the corners of the defense in particular later. They do have good receivers, though.
Yeah.
Terry McLaurin is a 1. Jahan Dotson had a terrible sophomore year, but showed a lot as a rookie. I do think if you can tidy up the O-line a little bit for this rookie quarterback. If it's Drake May, he's got some dudes to throw to in year one.
I mean, the makings are there for that to be a good offense if they can solidify the line. Like Brian Robinson in the backfield is a good player as well. I mean, they have Logan Thomas is a good tight end. They have weapons. Like, they just need the foundation piece to it. And, who knows? They might use him as a bridge quarterback for a while anyway, so it might be the same situation. But let's not forget that Sam Howell made that line look worse than it probably was because of the way he plays the game.
All right, did we fix the Commanders? At least got them pointed in the right direction.
Pointed in the right direction.
Gave them some
It's
options.
going to take more than one off season, I think, to fix that team.
Josh, it's a multi-year rebuild.
Multi-year.
We did have some listeners because we had Rick Spielman on the show. We did have some people listen to Rick's answers because we talked about the quarterbacks. He has Drake May as QB too.
It's good that somebody did that.
Somebody has takes.
Who listened to what he was saying.
Yeah, somebody did. They looked into the fact that Spielman was a consultant during the coaching search for Washington and said, well, he also has Drake May as QB too. Therefore, we're trying to connect the dots here that means that they're drafting the Drake May at 2.
Right.
I would not look too much into that. I mean, if you do hear Rick talk about his time consulting, it is literally just consulting and saying, here are the strengths and weaknesses for the coaching and GM candidates. Here's what I think. And then other people are making those decisions. So, like, Rick's not in the building, in draft meetings. It's also February. So I would not look too far into what Spielman's QB rankings are for him as a content producer for CBS Sports and try to link that to what the Washington Commanders are going to do just because he's got, contacts in the building.
Okay.
Just wanted to preface that for everybody. I don't know, I just saw it.
Rather disappointing throwing a damp cloth in the fire there. Should have been stoking that up. We had the answers.
Oh, okay, you're right. Yeah, Rick's in the building, and he's got Drake May number 2. Therefore, that's who's going number 2 to Washington.